Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm pleased to rise today and speak once more about Bill C-35, an act respecting early learning and childcare in Canada with respect to the amendments that were provided by the Senate. First, let me reiterate the Conservative Party's support for childcare and for supporting women entering or re-entering the workforce as they balance their family lives. We want to see Canadians have equal access to childcare in the forms that fit their family. This goes far beyond the Liberals' $10 a day daycare spots to include traditional daycare centres, centres with extended, part-time or overnight care, nurseries, flexible and drop-in care, before and after-school care, preschools and co-op childcare, faith-based care, unique programming to support children with disabilities, home-based care, nannies and shared nannies, au pairs, stay-at-home parents, or guardians who raise their own children, as well as family members, friends, or neighbors who provide care. This is what it means to make up and support community. And our children and our grandchildren are some of the most vulnerable members in our communities. They all deserve high-quality care in the chosen style of their caretakers. But my Liberal colleagues have been clear that they don't want to amend the bill overall to include choice for parents. This is unhelpful for a variety of reasons. So many Canadian parents are not in positions to send their children to traditional-style daycare during conventional work hours. First responders, medical personnel, military members, truck drivers, and a whole host of others must work through the nights, weekends, and holidays when many traditional daycares are closed and thus require specialized care. Do they not deserve flexible options that suit their needs, especially when so many of their jobs are community-focused? Anyone working unconventional shifts to provide for themselves and their families is just as deserving of high-quality, affordable childcare as those who work Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. I have personal experience in this realm. I raised my two daughters while traveling extensively for work as a chemical engineer. I've previously in this House discussed the challenges of securing childcare for them while working around my busy travel schedule, especially when factoring in the realities of travel, delays, changed timelines, flights canceled altogether. Families absolutely need options that work for their individual needs. When Conservatives form government, we will honour the provincial and territorial agreements and ensure parents have the choice and flexibility they deserve to remove the Liberal ideological shackles if they so desire. With regard to the Senate amendment of Bill C-35, the bill already contained references to the official language minority communities, or OLMCs, when it was sent to the Senate. However, the bill did not originally include any reference to them until the Conservative amendments were made during the clause-by-clause review done at HUMA Committee, and we introduced these safeguards. The references to the OLMCs in the bill now include a provision that federal investments related to programs and services for the education and care of young children should be guided by the commitments outlined in the Official Languages Act, and the inclusion of OLMCs and Indigenous peoples in the composition of the National Advisory Council on Childcare. We're grateful to the Honourable Senator from Acadia who proposed an amendment to include a reference to Section 8 to eliminate any ambiguity before the courts, and we continue to support his amendment today. The amendment adds the words official language minority communities to the first sentence of Section 8 after including early learning and childcare programs and services for Indigenous peoples, and divides Section 8 into two paragraphs. The first paragraph outlines the government's financial commitment, while the second specifies the mechanisms through which the federal government will provide funding. To allay any remaining hesitancy, under no circumstances is the intention to create a new direct negotiation mechanism between the federal government and the OLMCs. The amendment text is very clear on this matter. Furthermore, adding a mention of OLMCs after the word including doesn't in any way diminish the rights of any other minority or Indigenous peoples. Section 3 of the bill explicitly states that it doesn't infringe upon the rights of Indigenous peoples as recognized and affirmed by Section 35 of the Constitution Act of 1982. The amendment is simply to clarify the intent to ensure the consideration of OLMCs as stipulated in sections 7 and 11. There has been much study done on early childhood as a critical period for language development and the identity development of children. Access to French language early childhood services is often a necessary condition for the transmission of language and culture in French communities. These services help young children acquire the language skills they need to prepare for education, especially for those children who will enter French language or immersion schools across the country. This is all upholding the right to education enshrined in Section 23 of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Critically, and to assuage fears from across the aisle, this amendment doesn't introduce any new funding mechanism. It merely aims to clarify financial commitments. Especially with Sarnia-Lambton recently receiving the official Francophone designation, and with French language use in danger throughout the country, it is more critical than ever to establish and protect these services for our official language minority communities. This amendment was adopted by a large majority of senators who clearly understand and appreciate both the need to increase childcare spaces and access to them, and the need to deliver services across the board in both of our official Canadian languages. It's clear now more than ever just how important childcare, both obtaining and maintaining one's early childcare space, if they're lucky enough to have one, is critical for recruiting and retaining women in the workforce. The employment rate for young women has been on a strong downward trend since last February, with a cumulative decline of 4.2% over that period. This is the lowest since May of 2020, excluding the pandemic. More than 46% of parents reported difficulty finding childcare in 2023, which is up from 36.4% in 2019. So more parents are having trouble finding childcare now in the era of the Liberals' $10 a day childcare than before. A column in the Financial Post last week alleges that the Liberals' National Childcare Plan is proving to be an expensive shambles, creating widespread shortages and destroying private childcare businesses. This problem spans the country, with issues from Newfoundland and Labrador to British Columbia. This week, there have been a slate of news reports across the country with headlines despairing over the lack of access to childcare, including the Liberals' $10 a day program. Daycare operators, including the owner of Little Heroes Daycare Center here in Ottawa, say they can't turn a profit, and they aren't even breaking even since opting into the $10 a day program, which they did out of their desire to assist their families, to their own detriment. To further illustrate, as part of the Status of Women's current study of women's economic empowerment, the executive director of the Association of Daycare Operators of Ontario, which represents independent licensed childcare centers, said, "We have a sector of the economy that was largely created by women, is essential to women's equality in the workforce, and is one of the only economic sectors in the country where women have always been fairly represented as owners and managers. And it's not only being undervalued by the government, but targeted for replacement by a government-run system." The Liberals are undercutting their own economy once again and pushing costs onto taxpayers while denying Canadians the freedom to choose what works best for their families. What's more is that one of the main goals of the $10 a day plan was to enable women to join the workforce in greater numbers. But a recent Fraser Institute report looking at that issue indicates there is little evidence whether the Liberal program is reaching its goals stated. There is little evidence that the government is achieving the second goal of boosting the labour force participation of women with children. And as the StatsCan data I quoted earlier shows, the employment rate for young women is on the downward trend. It's another example of the problem of the Prime Minister's fake feminism. I'll be generous and allow that the pandemic exacerbated the issues of childcare, and many well-meaning parents changed their plans and their lives to accommodate for a more precarious world, either changing work hours to watch children, changing jobs, or leaving the workforce altogether. But the Liberals owe our Canadian parents and families that much more for letting them down in the first place. Conservatives, when we form government, will put Canadians first and prioritize freedom of choice and family life, empowering parents to make the decisions that best serve their childcare needs, not just what the government prescribes. And I would say, if I look over the history, Madam Speaker, of my own journey with childcare, I will say that it's very difficult when only 1 in 10 families are actually covered by the existing program. That's 9 out of 10 families that aren't. And I have people calling my office saying, can you help me find childcare? It's almost impossible. I had some very wonderful childcare providers and some very not so wonderful childcare providers. Miss Betty was a school teacher that was off with her own kids, and she was probably a better mother than I'll ever be. So certainly that was great. And she was flexible because I could drop the kids off at 5:30 in the morning because I had to catch a flight at 6 o'clock. And if the flight was canceled late or the kids had to stay late, she had flexibility. That's really important for a lot of workers today. Similarly, I had Joanne, and she was wonderful. She was a stay-at-home mom with her kids, and once again, flexibility and just excellent care. But she moved, and I was left then in a cycle of trying to find childcare, and started with Sarah, who was a mom at the preschool that my kids went to, but once my kids were eating cat food on her stairs, well, had to find another one. Then there was the student smoking weed and hanging out with her boyfriend. That one went away. Then there was the one named Karen. I should have known maybe just by the name. But anyway, watching soaps while I come home and find out that she's let my kids go swimming with a male neighbor someplace up the road. Anyway, not so great. Then Happy Occasions, Generations Daycare in Petrolia, wonderful experience and certainly expensive, but worth it. And then the pinnacle. Andrea, an ECE worker who became my nanny, who was able to stay overnight if I needed, make meals if I was traveling, do anything that was needed. And as my kids got older and went to high school, she opened her own daycare and they ended up working there. So that was fantastic. So there's a lot of needs, Madam Speaker. I think that we need more care, and in order to get more care, we've got to build on the $10 a day childcare. We've got to allow parents choice, and we've got to figure out how we're going to help those, because I think that's fair. I think we also need to consider that with the inflation that we're seeing, the cost of food is going up, the cost of heating is going up, the interest rates are going up. All of these pressures are really affecting the cost of providing childcare. And I know when we were at Status of Women Committee and we had studied this issue, we did look at the Quebec model. And at the time, Quebec was charging less than $10 a day for daycare. And the actual cost was more like $47 or $48. That will be, hugely increased now. But, the comment was that there were still long wait lists. So I think it's no good just having $10 a day daycare if there's no spaces. We need to provide more spaces. We need to be creative in figuring out how we help people get childcare and I think broadening out the freedom of choice so that people that work weird hours can get coverage. People that have special needs children can get the care that they need. All of these things, I think, will be important. Now, I would say that I know that all the provincial and territorial agreements have been signed. And so when I always hear the Liberals whining about the Conservatives wasting the House time on concurrence motions, but here we are debating something where the agreements are already signed. So having everyone said on the public record, that we support this program, I would say that you're right, we should move on. And finally, Madam Speaker, I just want to, reiterate some of the things that have been implied. They implied, the members opposite, that Conservatives don't support this program. That's not true. That's not true. And it's not true. And, Madam Speaker, we do support childcare. We do support this. We voted in favor of this. You go look it up on openparliament.ca and see we all voted yes, C-35. So, Madam Speaker, I think that there's more work to be done in this area. I certainly would like to see the government come with something that would address the increase of spaces, but also something that would help those that are less fortunate. We see that 71% of people that are taking advantage of the $10 daycare are higher income people, whereas only 41% are the lower income ones. That doesn't seem right to me. I think there needs to be a means test there. There needs to be something that favors those that need the help the most, because obviously we don't have enough spaces, so we have to prioritize. And I think that if we could work with the provinces and territories to create some flexibility, I think that would help these private daycares. We can't afford to lose them. As we're supporting one kind of daycare, we need more spaces. We can't afford to lose the ones that we have, and that's what's happening. I'm hearing from daycare providers that are not eligible for this program that they're struggling, and many of them are even going out of business. I've heard from the ones that are on the program that they're having issues with cash flow because of the way that the remuneration works. So I think there's more work to be done on this, but certainly we need to move in this direction. We want to see more women in the workforce. I certainly experienced the highs and the lows of childcare and would rather head in the direction of highs. So on that note, I'll leave it, Madam Speaker, and look for questions and comments.